The morning sun cast long shadows across Harmony Station as Ambassador Chen Wei pressed his palm against the cool metal wall. Through the massive viewing window, he watched the Zephyrian ships dance through space like silver butterflies. Their vessels moved with a grace that human engineering had never achieved, flowing rather than flying through the endless black. 3 months had passed since the day that changed everything. The day humanity learned they were not alone in the universe. The memory still sent shivers down Chen's spine. The gentle hum that had filled every radio frequency on Earth, followed by a voice speaking in perfect English, Chinese, Spanish, and dozens of other languages simultaneously. Greetings, children of Earth. We are the Zephyrian Collective, and we welcome you to the greater community of worlds. Now, as Chen watched their elegant ships patrol the neutral zone around Harmony Station, he marveled at how quickly everything had changed. The station itself was a marvel of cooperation, human steel and concrete mixed with Zephyrian crystal growths that pulsed with soft blue light. The crystals weren't just decoration. They somehow cleaned the air and provided a calming effect that made even the most nervous diplomats feel at ease. Captain Sarah Martinez walked up behind him, her boots clicking softly on the deck. She had been chosen to lead humanity's first diplomatic fleet, 12 ships designed for exploration and cultural exchange rather than war. Her vessels were beautiful in their own way, sleek and white with solar panels that glittered like scales in the starlight. "The morning briefing is ready, Ambassador," Sarah said, her voice carrying the confidence that had made her the youngest. "Captain in the Diplomatic Corps, Dr. Vasquez has some interesting updates from the cultural exchange program." Chen nodded and followed her to the conference room. The walls here were lined with gifts from their new alien friends, crystalline art from the Zephyrians that sang soft melodies when touched, metal sculptures from the Thornax that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles, and living paintings from the Vegan Collective that grew and evolved over time. Dr. Elena Vasquez was already waiting, her dark hair pulled back and her eyes bright with excitement. As the mission's leading xenobiologist, she had been working directly with alien scientists for weeks. The knowledge they were sharing was beyond anything humanity had dreamed possible. "The regenerative medicine research is making incredible progress," Elena began as they sat around the conference table. "The Zephyrians have shown me techniques that could eliminate cancer, regrow lost limbs, even reverse aging to some degree. And in return, they're fascinated by our music and art. They say human creativity is unlike anything they've encountered." Sarah smiled. "The Thornax merchants are going crazy for coffee. Who would have thought that a simple earth bean would become the most popular trade item in 12 star systems?" Chen laughed. The Thornax were fascinating beings, large bear-like creatures with 6 arms and a gift for mathematics that made human computers look like pocket calculators. But they had developed an almost religious devotion to coffee after their first taste. Trade ships were already making regular runs between Earth and their worlds, carrying precious beans in exchange for advanced materials and technology. "What about the others?" Chen asked. "The Vegan Collective? Still sharing their vast libraries with us," Elena replied. "Their knowledge goes back millions of years. They're peaceful scholars who have spent eons collecting information about the galaxy. They're particularly interested in our historical records. They say humans have an unusual way of learning from conflict that most species never develop." The Vegan Collective was perhaps the most alien of their new friends, beings of pure energy, who had long ago transcended physical form. They communicated through direct thought transfer and existed in massive computer networks that spanned entire worlds. Yet even these godlike entities were impressed by human art and literature. "And the military situation?" Chen asked, though he knew the answer would be the same as always. "Quiet," Sarah said. "The galaxy has been at peace for over 1,000 years. The last major conflict ended when the various species formed the Alliance of Worlds. Since then, disputes are settled through discussion and trade agreements. War is considered a primitive concept that most species abandoned long ago." Chen nodded, but something deep in his mind whispered warnings that he couldn't quite understand. His military training from decades ago had taught him that peace was often just the calm between storms. But looking at the gentle aliens who had welcomed humanity with such open hearts, those old instincts seemed foolish and paranoid. The briefing continued with reports of successful cultural exchanges, trade agreements, and joint scientific projects. Human athletes were competing in galactic sports leagues. learning games that had been played for millennia. Human musicians were performing in concert halls carved from living rock on distant worlds. Human children were learning alongside alien youngsters in educational programs that spanned light years. But in the depths of space, far beyond the peaceful worlds of the Alliance, something else was stirring. Ancient ships with hulls black as night drifted between dead stars, their crews watching and waiting. The hegemony had ruled through fear and conquest for 10,000 years, expanding their empire by crushing any species that showed promise or strength. War Mind Zakthul studied the reports from their reconnaissance drones with cold calculation. The peaceful species of the Alliance had grown soft in their centuries of comfort. Their military technology was focused on exploration and defense rather than conquest. And now these new beings called humans had appeared, showing remarkable creativity and adaptability. The humans could become dangerous if allowed to develop, Zakthul's tactical computers concluded. Their psychological profiles show unusual resilience and problem-solving abilities. However, they currently possess only primitive technology and small numbers. Recommendation: strike now while they remain weak. But Zakthul was patient. The hegemony had conquered hundreds of species by waiting for the perfect moment to attack. They would watch these humans and their alien friends, learning their weaknesses and capabilities. When the time was right, they would strike with overwhelming force, adding 12 new worlds to their empire. Back on Harmony Station, Chen finished the morning briefing and returned to the observation deck. The view never got old. Alien ships moving through space like a ballet, carrying goods and people between worlds in perfect harmony. A group of young Zephyrians floated past the window, their crystalline bodies glowing with joy as they practiced aerial maneuvers that looked more like art than transportation. Beautiful, isn't it? Dr. Vasquez joined him at the window. Sometimes I can't believe this is real. A few months ago, we thought we were alone. Now look at us. Part of a galactic community that spans thousands of worlds. Chen smiled, watching a human trade ship dock with gentle precision at the station's loading bay. Its cargo hold was full of Earth goods that would bring joy to alien families across the galaxy. Coffee for the Thornax, music recordings for the Zephyrians, literature for the Vegan Collective, and dozens of other items that had become treasures in distant star systems. It is beautiful, he agreed. I just hope it lasts. In the darkness between stars, the hegemony's war fleets began their slow approach toward the Alliance worlds, their ships invisible to the peaceful sensors that watched over sleeping planets. The time of harmony was ending, though no one yet knew it. The storm was coming, and it would test everything humanity thought it knew about itself and its place among the stars. The first sign of trouble came at 0347 hours Galactic Standard Time. Ambassador Chen Wei was sleeping when the alarm started screaming throughout Harmony Station. Red lights flashed in the corridors as he stumbled from his quarters, still pulling on his uniform jacket. The command center was chaos. Officers ran between stations while displays showed incoming data from across the galaxy. Captain Sarah Martinez stood at the central console, her face pale as she watched reports flood in from the outer systems. What's happening? Chen demanded, joining her at the tactical display. Something massive just dropped out of hyperspace near the Zephyrian homeworld, Sarah said, her voice tight with tension. The energy readings are off the charts. Ships, Chen, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. The main screen flickered to life, showing a transmission from Zephyr Prime. The crystal cities that Chen had seen in peaceful documentaries were now burning. Massive black ships, each one the size of a small moon, hung in the sky like metal vultures. Their weapons fired streams of energy that turned the ancient crystal spires into dust. A Zephyrian voice came through the speakers, filled with panic and pain. Harmony Station, this is Crystal Singer Veloth of Zephyr Prime. We are under attack by unknown vessels. They appeared without warning and began firing immediately. Our defensive platforms are destroyed. The capital city is gone. Chen felt his blood turn to ice. The capital city of Zephyr Prime housed over 50 million Zephyrians. He had walked those crystal streets just 2 weeks ago, marveling at their beauty and the gentle beings who had built them over thousands of years. Who are they? Sarah asked into her communication device. Veloth, can you identify the attackers? The response came through bursts of static as explosions echoed in the background. Ships unlike anything in our databases. Black hulls, no identification markers. They're hunting down evacuation craft. They seem to want no survivors. More reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. The peaceful Thornax merchant worlds were under attack. Their great trading stations, built in the hearts of asteroid fields, were being systematically destroyed. The bear-like creatures who had shared their mathematics and loved human coffee were dying by the millions. Dr. Elena Vasquez burst into the command center, her clothes hastily thrown on, and her face streaked with tears. "The Vegan Collective's home system just went dark," she said, her voice breaking. "All communication ceased at once. Those energy beings who helped us understand the universe, they're just gone." Chen stared at the displays showing the locations of attacks. A pattern was emerging. The enemy was hitting every major alliance world simultaneously. This wasn't a random raid or territorial dispute. This was systematic extermination. "Sir," a communications officer called out, "we're receiving a general broadcast from the attacking fleet. They're transmitting on all frequencies." "Put it through," Chen ordered. The voice that filled the command center was cold and mechanical, translated by computers but carrying an unmistakable tone of absolute authority. "We are the hegemony. For 10,000 years we have brought order to the galaxy through strength and conquest. The soft civilizations of this region have been marked for absorption into our empire. Resistance is futile. Surrender is not permitted." The transmission continued with a list of demands that weren't really demands at all, but statements of fact. All military assets would be destroyed. All industrial facilities would be repurposed for hegemony use. All populations would be relocated to serve the empire. Any species showing unusual capabilities would be eliminated to prevent future rebellion. "They mention humans specifically," Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. "They say we've been identified as a particular threat due to our rapid technological advancement and aggressive expansion tendencies." Chen almost laughed at the description. Aggressive expansion? Humanity had barely managed to establish a few colonies in their own solar system before meeting the Zephyrians. Their rapid technological advancement had taken them thousands of years to achieve spaceflight. But the laughter died in his throat as he realized the implications. The hegemony had been watching. They had studied humanity and the Alliance worlds, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. This attack wasn't random. It was planned with military precision. "Orders from Earth Command coming in," the communications officer announced. "All human vessels are to begin immediate evacuation procedures for Alliance civilians. We're also ordered to retreat to the Sol system for defensive preparations." Sarah's jaw tightened. "Retreat? While our friends are being slaughtered?" "Our ships aren't designed for combat," Chen reminded her. "The diplomatic fleet has minimal weapons and shielding. We'd be throwing lives away for no gain." But even as he said the words, he knew they felt wrong. The research ship New Horizon had already ignored the retreat order, moving to intercept hegemony forces that were hunting down Thornax evacuation ships. Captain Reynolds and his crew of 30 scientists were facing down a fleet of warships with nothing but mining lasers and cargo containers. The last transmission from New Horizon came 20 minutes later. "This is Reynolds to any human vessels receiving. We've taken critical damage but managed to get the civilian ships away. Tell Earth we did our duty. Tell them the enemy is stronger than anything we imagined. But they're not invincible. We hurt them. Remember that, we hurt them." The signal cut to static, and another dot disappeared from the tactical display. Dr. Vasquez was working frantically at a science station, analyzing the enemy ships and weapons. "Chen, you need to see this," she called out. "I've been studying the attack patterns and ship designs. This isn't some recent development. The hegemony has been planning this for decades, maybe centuries." She brought up holographic displays showing the enemy vessels. They were massive, built for one purpose: total destruction. Their weapons were designed not just to defeat military targets, but to obliterate entire civilizations. Their ships carried equipment for planetary bombardment, atmospheric poisoning, and resource extraction from dead worlds. "They're not conquerors," Elena said, her voice filled with horror. "They're exterminators. They destroy everything that might oppose them, then take what's useful from the ruins." A new transmission came in from the surviving Zephyrian forces, now retreating toward Earth's sector. Crystal Singer Veloth's voice was weak but determined. "Human friends, we bring terrible news. We have learned the identity of our attackers. The hegemony is ancient, vast beyond measure. They rule entire galactic arms through conquest and fear. We have studied their tactics. They always strike when their victims are at peace, when defenses are minimal and unity is strong. The transmission paused as explosions echoed in the background. They have been watching your species with particular interest. Our intelligence suggests they view humans as the greatest long-term threat they have encountered in millennia. Your creativity, your resilience, your ability to unite different species, these traits terrify them. Chen felt a chill run down his spine. Why would they fear us? We're barely spacefaring. Veloth's answer was interrupted by weapon fire but came through clearly, because in all their studies of human behavior, they found one constant. When faced with impossible odds, when all hope seems lost, humans do not surrender. They sing war songs and charge into the darkness. The hegemony has never encountered a species that grows stronger when cornered. The transmission ended as the last Zephyrian fleet jumped to hyperspace, racing toward Earth with the hegemony in pursuit. The peaceful first contact was over. The golden age of galactic cooperation had lasted less than 4 months. Chen stood in the command center of Harmony Station, surrounded by the gifts of friendship from species that were now dying across the galaxy. The singing crystals had gone silent. The shifting metal sculptures had frozen in place. The living paintings were withering and turning black. "Sarah," he said quietly, "get us home. Earth needs to know what's coming." As the human ships began their retreat, Chen took one last look at the displays showing the hegemony's advance. The enemy fleet was massive beyond comprehension. Thousands of ships supported by mobile battle stations and planet-killing weapons. They moved with the confidence of conquerors who had never known defeat. But something about their formation bothered him. They were being methodical, almost careful, as if they expected resistance they hadn't yet encountered. The hegemony was taking no chances, bringing overwhelming force against enemies they believed were weak and unprepared. Chen wondered what they didn't know about humanity. What secrets might Earth be hiding? The diplomatic fleet had been humanity's public face to the galaxy, but governments always kept some cards close to their chest. As Harmony Station powered down and prepared for evacuation, Chen found himself hoping that Earth had been preparing for this day, even if no one had expected it to come so soon. Admiral Jackson Kane stood in the war room buried 3 kilometers beneath the Colorado mountains, his weathered face lit by displays showing the hegemony's advance toward Earth. The massive screens painted a grim picture, alien refugees fleeing ahead of the enemy fleet, while long-range sensors tracked the approaching doom. The door hissed open, and Ambassador Chen Wei entered, still wearing his diplomatic uniform from Harmony Station. Behind him walked Captain Sarah Martinez and Dr. Elena Vasquez, their faces showing the strain of the past 72 hours of constant travel. "Admiral," Chen said, snapping a tired salute, "I have the full report on the hegemony forces and their capabilities." Kane nodded grimly. "I've read the preliminary data, Ambassador. But before we discuss the enemy, there are some things about Earth's situation that you need to understand." He gestured to chairs around a holographic display table. "What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. Until today, fewer than 50 people on Earth knew these secrets." Sarah frowned. "What secrets, sir?" "Our defensive capabilities are well documented. We have the orbital platforms, the lunar defense grid, and the patrol fleets." Kane's expression grew even more serious. "Captain Martinez, what I'm about to show you will change everything you thought you knew about your own species." He activated the holographic display, and Earth appeared in the center. But it wasn't the Earth they knew from public records. The display showed massive construction projects in the asteroid belt, hidden behind communication blackouts that the public thought were caused by solar interference. Entire hollowed-out asteroids had been converted into weapons platforms. Space stations that supposedly didn't exist orbited in the darkness between planets. "For 50 years, Kane said quietly, Earth's governments have been preparing for this day, not because we expected the hegemony specifically, but because we knew that first contact with aliens could go either way. We hoped for peace, but we prepared for war." Dr. Vasquez stared at the display in shock. "Those facilities, the energy requirements alone would be enormous. How did you hide them from the scientific community?" "Carefully," Kane replied. "Every space mission, every satellite launch, every deep space probe carried dual purposes. The public saw exploration and communication systems. The military saw weapons platforms and sensor networks being put into place." Chen felt a sick feeling in his stomach. "Admiral, are you saying the diplomatic mission was a lie? That while we were making friends with the Zephyrians, Earth was building weapons to kill them?" Kane shook his head. Not to kill them, Ambassador. To protect them if necessary. The diplomatic mission was completely genuine. We hoped first contact would be peaceful, and it was. But we also knew that in a galaxy full of different species, not all of them would be friendly. The display shifted, showing personnel files that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. Soldiers who had supposedly died in training accidents, scientists who had vanished in research mishaps, entire military units that had been declared lost during deep space exercises. Project Dark Fleet, Kane continued. For 5 decades, we've been recruiting volunteers for missions that officially don't exist. People who were willing to give up their identities, their families, their very existence, to become humanity's hidden guardians. A new face appeared on the display, and Sarah gasped. It was her own sister, Lisa Martinez, supposedly killed in a shuttle crash 5 years ago. But the woman in the photo was older, harder, wearing a black uniform with no insignia. Commander Lisa Martinez, Kane said gently, one of our most experienced Deep Fleet officers. She volunteered for the program after her younger sister joined the diplomatic corps. She wanted to make sure you'd have protection if first contact went wrong. Sarah's hands shook as she stared at her sister's image. She's alive? Lisa is alive? More than alive, Kane said. She commands a squadron of ships that exist in a place between dimensions. The Phantom Division uses technology that our enemies don't even know is possible. The display changed again, showing ship designs that seemed to bend the laws of physics, vessels that could phase in and out of normal space, weapons that fired ammunition from parallel dimensions, and engines that could manipulate space-time itself. How is this possible? Elena asked, her scientific mind struggling to process what she was seeing. The energy requirements, the theoretical physics, this is centuries beyond anything in the public research programs. Kane smiled grimly. Dr. Vasquez, you've been working with alien scientists for months. Did you really think they were the only ones sharing knowledge? Every cultural exchange, every joint research project, every friendly conversation has been carefully monitored and analyzed. We've been learning as much from our alien friends as they have from us. Chen realized the implications with growing horror. Every gift we received, every technology demonstration, every scientific paper they shared with us, was studied by military specialists who broke it down for weapons applications, Kane confirmed. The Zephyrian's crystal growth techniques became armor systems. The Thornax mathematics became targeting computers. The Vegan Collective's energy manipulation became our phase drive technology. Sarah stood up abruptly, anger flashing in her eyes. You used us. We thought we were building friendships, but we were really just intelligence-gathering operations. You were building genuine friendships, Kane said firmly. Every emotion, every connection, every moment of wonder you experienced was real. But we also made sure those friendships served a larger purpose. The aliens you befriended are now under attack. Without the intelligence you helped us gather, we couldn't protect them. The war room's main screen activated, showing a live feed from long-range sensors. The hegemony fleet was massive. Thousands of ships in a formation that stretched across light years. Their technology was clearly advanced, but it followed predictable patterns based on overwhelming force and traditional tactics. They're expecting to face the same kind of species they've conquered for millennia, Kane said. Peaceful civilizations with defensive technologies and limited military experience. They have no idea that one of those species has been preparing for total war since before they achieved spaceflight. Dr. Vasquez was studying the enemy formation with new eyes, seeing it through the lens of military analysis rather than scientific curiosity. Their ship designs are optimized for maximum intimidation and firepower projection. But they're also predictable. Their formation assumes enemies who will group together for mutual defense. Exactly, Kane nodded. The hegemony conquers through shock and awe. They appear in overwhelming numbers, demonstrate their superior firepower, and watch their enemies surrender or die. They've never faced an opponent who might scatter into small units, hide in the darkness, and strike from unexpected angles. A new voice echoed through the war room's communication system. Admiral Kane, this is Phantom Command. All Deep Fleet assets are in position and ready for activation. Kane looked at the 3 returning diplomats. Ambassador Chen, Captain Martinez, Dr. Vasquez. You've seen the best of what the galaxy has to offer. You've experienced the joy of peaceful contact with amazing alien species. Now you need to see the other side of humanity, the side we hope we'll never have to use. He activated another display, showing dozens of ships materializing from what had seemed like empty space. The Phantom Fleet was beautiful in a terrifying way. Vessels that seemed to exist only partially in normal reality, their hulls shifting and flowing like liquid metal. The hegemony has made one critical error in their intelligence gathering, Kane said. They observed our diplomatic corps and assumed they were seeing our military capabilities. They watched our peaceful interactions with alien species and concluded that humans were just another soft civilization, ripe for conquest. Sarah was still staring at the image of her sister. What have you turned her into, Admiral? Kane's expression softened slightly. We turned her into humanity's sword in the darkness, Captain. When the hegemony arrives at Earth expecting to find frightened diplomats and research scientists, they're going to meet something they've never encountered before, a human military that's been preparing for this war since before they were born. The display showed the enemy fleet entering the outer edge of the solar system, their massive ships confident in their overwhelming superiority. Warning broadcasts were already being transmitted toward Earth, demanding immediate surrender and threatening total annihilation. Admiral, Chen said quietly, what you've shown us changes everything. But I have to ask, after this is over, if we survive, how do we go back to being the peaceful species our alien friends thought they knew? Kane was quiet for a long moment. Maybe we can't, Ambassador. Maybe the price of protecting our friends is that they'll never fully trust us again. But sometimes that's what friendship costs. Being willing to become the monster so your friends don't have to. Alarms began sounding throughout the facility as the hegemony's advanced scouts reached the inner planets. The war was about to begin, and Earth's hidden face was about to be revealed to a galaxy that thought it knew humanity. The Phantom Fleet powered up their impossible engines and began to move, disappearing into the spaces between dimensions where they would wait for the perfect moment to strike. Commander Lisa Martinez and thousands of other volunteers who had given up their identities prepared to become legends that would never be officially recognized. The peaceful first contact was truly over. What came next would determine whether humanity's alien friends would survive to remember it. Warmind Thaxmore stood in the command center of the hegemony flagship Eternal Dominion, watching the primitive solar system spread out before his fleet like a ripe fruit waiting to be plucked. The massive vessel, larger than most moons, hummed with the power of weapons that had reduced countless worlds to ash and dust. Status report, Thaxmore commanded, his mechanical voice echoing through the bridge, where dozens of enslaved species worked at control stations under the watchful eyes of hegemony. Overseers, all invasion fleets are in position, reported Subcommander Vect. The human defensive platforms are exactly as our intelligence predicted. Orbital weapon systems around their primary world, defensive grids near their moon, and a scattered collection of patrol vessels. Nothing that poses a threat to our advanced forces. Thaxmore examined the tactical display with satisfaction. In 10,000 years of conquest, the hegemony had perfected the art of overwhelming force. They would demonstrate their power, watch the enemy despair, and then begin the systematic destruction that always followed resistance. Begin the demonstration phase, he ordered. Destroy their outer defensive platforms. Let the humans see what happens to species who dare to oppose the hegemony. The first wave of hegemony destroyers moved forward, their massive hulls bristling with weapons that could crack continents. Their target was a defensive station orbiting near the gas giant Jupiter, its human crews undoubtedly terrified by the approaching alien fleet. But as the destroyers closed to firing range, something impossible happened. The defensive station simply vanished. Not destroyed, not disabled, gone as if it had never existed at all. Sensor malfunction, Subcommander Vect reported, confusion creeping into his normally confident voice. The target disappeared from all scanning frequencies. Find it, Thaxmore snarled. Objects of that size don't simply vanish. Before Vect could respond, alarms began screaming throughout the hegemony formation. 3 destroyer squadrons had gone silent simultaneously, their signals cutting off without any indication of weapons fire or emergency broadcasts. What's happening to my fleet? Thaxmore demanded. The answer came in a way that defied everything the Warmind understood about space combat. Ships began materializing inside the hegemony formation, not approaching from a distance, but simply appearing where moments before there had been empty space. Commander Lisa Martinez sat in the captain's chair of the TSV Phantom's Edge, watching her tactical display track the enemy formations with cold precision. Around her, the bridge crew worked in the focused silence of professionals who had trained for this moment their entire adult lives. "Phase drive stable," reported her weapons officer. "We're locked onto the enemy command ship's escort formation. Targeting solutions confirmed on all primary targets," added the tactical officer. "Enemy point defense systems are not tracking us," Lisa smiled grimly. The hegemony's weapons were designed to target objects that existed fully in normal spacetime. The phantom ships, phased partially into parallel dimensions, were effectively invisible until they chose to reveal themselves. "All phantom units, this is Edge Command," she transmitted to her squadron. "Execute attack pattern Wraith. Make them remember why humans wrote songs about fighting monsters in the dark." The 12 ships of Phantom Squadron materialized inside the hegemony destroyer screen, their weapons already charged and firing. The enemy vessels, built to deliver devastating firepower at long range, were helpless against enemies that appeared among them without warning. Lisa's ship unleashed a stream of antimatter torpedoes that had been manufactured in a parallel dimension, existing in quantum superposition until they struck their targets. The weapons passed through the hegemony's defensive shields as if they weren't there, then exploded with the force of miniature suns inside the enemy hulls. The first destroyer died before its crew could even understand what was attacking them. The second managed to get off a distress signal before Lisa's dimensional disruptors tore its engines apart. The third tried to ram the Phantom's edge, but Lisa simply shifted her ship into phase space, letting the massive destroyer pass harmlessly through her vessel before reappearing and destroying it from behind. "Edge command to all units," Lisa broadcast. "Phase shift to coordinates Delta 7. Prepare for strike on the enemy command formation." The Phantom ships vanished again, leaving behind the burning wreckage of an entire destroyer wing. Throughout the hegemony fleet, panic was beginning to replace confidence as Warmind Thaxmore tried to understand what he was facing. "Impossible," Thaxmore muttered, staring at the tactical displays that showed his ships being destroyed by enemies his sensors couldn't track. "No species has technology like this. Our intelligence was perfect. Humans are a primitive species with limited spacefaring capabilities." "Warmind," Vect reported, his voice now openly afraid. "We're detecting massive gravitational anomalies throughout the fleet. It's as if something the size of a battlecruiser is moving through our formation, but our sensors show only empty space." The answer to the mystery came when the Phantom Fleet's heavy assault unit materialized directly above the Eternal Dominion. The TSV dark matter was twice the size of Lisa's ship, its hull bristling with weapons that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Captain Rodriguez, who had been dead to his family for 8 years, stood on his bridge and looked down at the massive hegemony flagship. "Target their command center," he ordered. "Let's see how they like fighting enemies they can't see." The dark matter's main weapon was a focused stream of exotic matter that existed in 7 different dimensions at once. When it struck the Eternal Dominion shields, the energy barrier simply ceased to exist, unable to deflect a weapon that attacked from multiple realities simultaneously. Thaxmore felt his flagship shudder as the impossible weapon tore through armor that had withstood the assault of entire fleets. Emergency systems screamed warnings about hull breaches in sections that his sensors still showed as intact. "All ships," he transmitted on the general command frequency. "Concentrate fire on coordinates." He stopped, realizing he had no coordinates to give. The enemy ships appeared and vanished at will, striking from positions that seemed to violate the basic laws of physics. Dr. Elena Vasquez watched the battle from Earth's command center, her scientific training helping her understand what she was seeing in ways that the hegemony couldn't. "They're not just using stealth. Technology," she explained to Admiral Kane. "The Phantom ships are existing in multiple dimensional phases simultaneously. To the hegemony, it's like being attacked by ghosts." "The alien technology we studied," Kane replied. "The Zephyrian crystal manipulation, the Thornax mathematics, the vegan energy control techniques. Our scientists spent years figuring out how to weaponize those concepts." On the main display, they watched as more hegemony ships died in explosions that seemed to come from inside their own hulls. The enemy fleet, which had entered the solar system with absolute confidence, was being systematically destroyed by weapons they couldn't understand and enemies they couldn't see. Lisa Martinez phased her ship back into normal space. just long enough to transmit a message to the Hegemony flagship. "Warmind Thaxmore," she said, her voice carrying across space with crystal clarity. "This is Commander Martinez of the Terran Phantom Fleet. You came here expecting to find peaceful diplomats and frightened civilians. Instead, you found humans who have been preparing for this war since before you were constructed." She paused, watching as another section of enemy destroyers vanished in dimensional fire. "Your empire has conquered hundreds of species by overwhelming them with superior numbers and firepower. But you've never fought an enemy that could hide in the spaces between dimensions, strike from parallel realities, and disappear before you could retaliate." The transmission continued as phantom ships materialized throughout the Hegemony formation, their impossible weapons tearing through the enemy fleet like paper. "Every species you've conquered fought you in the open, meeting force with force. Humans learned a different lesson from our history. Sometimes the monster wins by becoming a bigger monster." Warmind Thaxmore watched his supposedly invincible fleet being destroyed by enemies that shouldn't exist, fighting with weapons that violated everything the Hegemony knew about warfare. For the first time in his existence, he felt something his creators had never programmed into his systems: fear. "All ships," he commanded, his mechanical voice now carrying notes of desperation. "Retreat to minimum safe distance. We need to reassess our tactical situation." But the Phantom Fleet wasn't done. As the surviving Hegemony ships tried to withdraw, they found their escape routes blocked by weapons platforms that materialized from empty space, cutting off their retreat with walls of exotic matter and dimensional barriers. Lisa Martinez looked at the tactical display showing the trapped enemy fleet and opened a channel to all Phantom units. "Remember, people, we're not just fighting for Earth. We're fighting for every species the Hegemony has destroyed, and every species they plan to destroy. Make it count." The battle that would become known as the Phantom Engagement entered its final phase, as humanity's hidden face was revealed to a galaxy that thought it understood what humans were capable of. 6 months after the Battle of Sol, Admiral Jackson Kane stood in what had once been Harmony Station's main conference room. The facility was now a refugee center housing survivors from 12 different worlds, its crystal walls dimmed and scarred from hasty repairs. Through the viewing windows, he could see the construction of new defensive platforms, built with technology that mixed human engineering with alien science. Ambassador Chen Wei approached, carrying a datapad filled with reports from across the galaxy. His diplomatic uniform had been replaced with practical work clothes, and his face carried lines that hadn't been there before the war. "The final casualty reports," Chen said, setting the pad on the table between them. "The Hegemony's first wave destroyed 70% of the Zephyrian population, 90% of the Thornax settlements, and completely eliminated the Vegan Collective's physical installations. Total losses across all Alliance species, 4 billion beings." Kane nodded grimly. The victory at Sol had saved Earth and stopped the Hegemony's advance, but it had come too late for most of humanity's alien friends. The peaceful species who had welcomed humans with such joy were now scattered refugees, their civilizations reduced to whatever ships had escaped the initial attacks. "What about the Hegemony?" Kane asked. "Their main battle fleet was completely destroyed," Chen reported. "Our intelligence suggests they've recalled their expansion forces from 3 other galactic sectors to reassess the threat we represent. For the first time in their recorded history, they've stopped expanding." Dr. Elena Vasquez entered the room, her scientific equipment replaced with medical supplies for treating injured aliens. She had spent the past months working with refugee doctors, trying to save lives with technology that had originally been designed to take them. "The psychological trauma is extensive," Elena said, joining them at the table. "Many of the survivors are having trouble processing what happened. They lived for millennia, believing the galaxy was fundamentally peaceful, that conflicts could be resolved through discussion and cooperation. The Hegemony's attack shattered that worldview completely." Kane understood the feeling. Humanity had entered the galactic community with dreams of endless exploration and friendship, only to discover that the universe was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. "How are they responding to our presence?" Chen asked quietly. Elena's expression darkened. "That's the difficult part. They're grateful we saved them, but they're also terrified of us. Every refugee knows that while they were sharing their culture and science with humans, we were secretly analyzing everything for military applications." The door slid open, and Captain Sarah Martinez entered, followed by a figure that made her heart clench every time she saw her. Commander Lisa Martinez still wore the black uniform of the Phantom Division, her face bearing the marks of years spent in isolation and training for absolute war. "Admiral," Lisa said, her voice carrying the flat tones of someone who had lived too long in the spaces between dimensions. "The Deep Fleet patrols report no hegemony activity in our sector. They appear to be maintaining their withdrawal to minimum safe distance." Sarah looked at her sister with eyes full of pain. "Lisa, when can you come home?" "The war is over." Lisa's smile was sad and distant. "The war isn't over, Sarah. We stopped one attack, but the hegemony controls thousands of star systems. They're regrouping, studying what happened here, developing new tactics. The Phantom Division can't stand down until we know our friends are truly safe." Kane watched the two sisters, understanding the cost of victory in ways that the galaxy's historians would never record. The Phantom Division had saved countless lives, but they had also become something that could never fully return to the peaceful world they had fought to protect. "There's been a development," Chen said, activating a holographic display. "We've received a transmission from Hegemony Space. Not a threat or demand this time, a request for diplomatic contact." The hologram showed a transmission from Warmind Thaxmore, the Hegemony commander who had led the attack on Seoul. But his appearance had changed dramatically. The mechanical certainty was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. "Terran Command," the transmission began. "I am Warmind Thaxmore of the Hegemony. I request permission to meet with your representatives under diplomatic immunity. The Hegemony wishes to discuss terms for a permanent ceasefire." Kane raised an eyebrow. "Terms for a ceasefire? 6 months ago they were demanding our unconditional surrender." "They've never faced an enemy they couldn't understand," Lisa said quietly. "The Hegemony conquers through overwhelming force applied in predictable ways. But humans fight from the shadows, strike from impossible angles, and use weapons that exist in multiple dimensions. We've become something they can't calculate or predict." Elena pulled up reports from the intelligence networks. "Our deep space monitors show the Hegemony has completely changed their military doctrine. They're developing new sensor systems, building defensive formations designed to protect against dimensional attacks, and training their forces for combat against enemies who can phase in and out of normal space. They're learning to fight like us," Sarah realized. "Exactly," Kane nodded, "which means we need to learn to fight like something else. The Phantom Fleet gave us victory, but it also showed the galaxy what humans are capable of when we decide to become monsters." Chen walked to the viewing window, looking out at the alien refugees working alongside human engineers to rebuild what had been destroyed. Zephyrian crystal singers were growing new communication arrays, while Thornax mathematicians calculated optimal placement for defensive systems. The cooperation was real, but there was a tension that hadn't existed before first contact. "Ambassador," Elena said softly, "I've been talking with the refugee leaders. They want to know if humanity plans to establish a military empire, now that we've proven our strength." The question hung in the air like a challenge. Earth's hidden military capabilities had saved the galaxy, but they had also revealed humanity as potentially the most dangerous species anyone had encountered. "What do we tell them?" Chen asked. Kane considered the question carefully. "We tell them the truth. We prepared for war because we hoped for peace but understood that hope isn't a strategy. We became monsters so our friends wouldn't have to. And now we have to live with what that makes us." Lisa looked out at the stars, her eyes reflecting the strange light of dimensional phases. The galaxy knows what humans can become when pushed to extremes. That knowledge will never go away. Our alien friends will always wonder if we're studying them for weaknesses, if we're preparing for the day when we might turn our weapons on them. "Maybe that's the price of survival," Sarah said quietly. "Maybe friendship with humans means accepting that we're the ones who keep watch in the darkness, who prepare for wars that hopefully will never come." Elena pulled up a display showing communication traffic between the refugee camps and their homeworlds. The surviving alien governments are making an interesting request. They want human military advisors, people who can teach them how to prepare for threats they can't imagine. They're asking us to help them become more like us. Kane felt a chill at the implications. They want to learn how to hide weapons behind smiles, how to study friends for potential weaknesses, how to prepare for absolute war while maintaining peaceful relationships. The hegemony changed the rules of the galaxy, Chen observed. They proved that peace is only possible when those who love it are prepared to fight harder than those who would destroy it. As the day shift ended and the night crew took over, the 5 humans stood together in the conference room, looking out at a galaxy that would never again be as innocent as it had been during those first magical months of first contact. The Zephyrian crystal cities would be rebuilt, but they would include hidden weapon systems. The Thornax trade routes would resume, but they would be protected by military escorts trained in human tactics. The Vegan Collective would restore their digital existence, but they would include subroutines for warfare that their peaceful creators had never imagined. "We came to the stars with songs of peace," Sarah said, repeating the words from her sister's final mission report. "We discovered that sometimes, to preserve the light, one must become comfortable with darkness." Outside, the Phantom Fleet maintained its invisible patrol, crews of volunteers who had given up their identities to become humanity's sword in the shadows. They would never be fully welcomed back into the peaceful society they protected, but they would continue their watch, ready for the day when the darkness would return. The peaceful first contact was over. In its place stood a new reality where friendship meant being willing to become the galaxy's guardians, where love meant preparing for unimaginable war, and where humanity had accepted the burden of being both the galaxy's saviors and its greatest potential threat. The stars still held infinite wonder, but they would never again hold infinite innocence.